Hello, scrufftards, vatniks, and random strangers. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And in this video, we will return to the western flank in the Kursk Oblast because Ukraine keeps advancing. But before that, I want to highlight a video I saw yesterday. I'm gonna provide a link to it below. It is an approximation based on open source intelligence on how Ukraine pushed into the Kursk Oblast and took the Russians by surprise. And it's a wonderful, detailed video showing us the Ukrainian Thunder Blitz. And what the hell is a Thunder Blitz? Well, it's something I talked about during the Ukrainian summer offensive of 2023, where I speculated Ukraine was going to attempt something like that in one of the areas where they're pushing. And essentially, it is the combination of a Thunder Run and Blitzkrieg encirclements, right? So Thunder Run, Blitzkrieg, Thunder Blitz. Anyway, moving on. So I think it's working. I'm doing my first video on my new computer, so I'm not used to everything here quite yet, but I think it's working. Anyway, so it all started on the 6th of August at 0734, and by the 7th of August, in the middle, shortly after midnight, this is what Ukraine had achieved. And this here is what is known as thunder runs, when you go deep, 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 deep along a highway or a road to get in behind enemy positions, right? So as you can see, Ukraine started it off with thunder runs, then pushed in here. And here you can see how they are now beginning to expand towards this road here where they have troops in place to begin an encirclement. And this is what you do in Blitzkrieg. You push in and then encircle the enemy, forcing him to quickly relocate and fall back. Or if he stays in place, he is now surrounded and cut off, and either he surrenders or he will be ground down to dust in the fighting that will ensue. And as you can see here, they're now also beginning to push out this way to begin more pushes north with thunder runs. And oh, well, there we go. And then by morning on the 7th, as you can see, if you compare with the previous image here, now they are beginning with encirclements, right? They're connected here, and they're about to connect here, and then they're about to push in here, trapping these Russians and securing the entire area. And this is how they are taking so many POWs. This is how you take prisoners of war. You cut them off, and they basically have a choice of surrendering or fighting to the death. And these young conscripts holding these defensive lines have surrendered en masse. And this is what you try to achieve with Blitzkrieg tactics. And so what you're seeing here, classic Blitzkrieg that the Western armies has adopted from Germany after World War II. Everyone does this in the West. Here you have thunder runs, also Western tactics. To be fair, you could say that Russian deep battle relies heavily on thunder runs as well, where you push deep and then fan out and strike at targets all over the place in Russian deep battle. And that is basically kind of what you do with thunder runs as well. You push in, get in behind the enemy. They are now in panic mode. They have enemies behind them. They don't know what's going on. Meanwhile, you have more heavily armed forces pushing in, making these encirclement maneuvers, trying to link up with the forces that have conducted the thunder run. And later on the 7th afternoon, here you can see the movements during the morning, and take a look at this. Boom, encirclements complete, and you have Ukrainian mop-up operations securing this part of the area. Now they're beginning to push north of Malava Lochnia, trying to push slightly northeast. Still not much going on over here. You can see they're pushing out somewhat here in the defensive lines, preparing for a push more than likely as they're doing that. But this here, blitzkrieg tactics, still thunder runs, causing mayhem, confusion, and stuff like that. Right, midnight, as August the 8th kicks off. Take a look what's happening here, and now cleanup operations, and they're pushing out again, right? Another push for encirclement, blitzkrieg. You're pushing out to your friendlies that have pushed in behind the enemy. This is a blitzkrieg move right here. They're also pushing out this way, taking advantages, pushing up along this road here that they have secured. Still not much going on here, but here the Thunder Run continues northward. Now the risk with Thunder Run is overextending, going too deep, right? Making it easy for the enemy to push in and cut you off and stuff like that. But and as we will see later on, I don't think I'm going to show that. I'm not going to show the entire video here. But this push here will eventually fall back because it has overextended and they can't really rely on this push to conduct any encirclement maneuvers. So towards the end of the video, you will see this push falling back because as the operation unfolds, the Ukrainians realize that they can't utilize this push, and so these forces fall back to a more tactically advantageous location. But anyway, as you can see, we are now seeing more encirclements taking place, and Ukraine is pushing westward along the flank here in more traditional frontline action fashion. And yeah, so by morning on the 8th, as you can see, we have now pushed out towards Malava-Loknia to link up with friendly forces, creating another pocket. You're pushing out, forcing Russians to surrender or fight to the death. And again, these conscripts surrender en masse. Nothing strange about it. It's all according to plan. Although the Ukrainians did not expect to grab as many POWs as they did, apparently, so they had trouble transporting all the Russian prisoners of war back to POW camps within Ukraine. But that's the nature of blitzkrieg. If you do it right, you take the enemy by surprise, you surround them, and you have mass surrenders from the enemy. And that has been proven to be true over and over again when you conduct these mechanized maneuvers as intended. You can also see that they're now pushing up to Koronovo, pushing up to Snagost, and take a look what's happening here. Another push, more traditional frontline mechanized push in here, but this is again blitzkrieg. You have pushed through the enemy, you have secured ground behind him, and then you're moving in to exploit that situation to create these pockets, and that's what's going on here. You have main push in, and then you're swinging around on the flanks to create all these pockets that will force the Russians to surrender en masse. And by morning on the 8th, as you can see, Ukraine is pushed out. They've reached the Thunder Run, create another pocket, pushing south with cleanup, mop-up actions, taking more POWs. They're pushing in strongly with mechanized units to reach this Thunder Run to create more pockets. Blitzkrieg, Thunder Runs, it's a masterful Thunder Blitz that we're watching in this video. And well, I think it's potentially pretty accurate. It looks legit, if you ask me. Also, if you're wondering, this number is supposedly Ukrainian troops involved so far. Not sure if that's true, but like the guy says, who made the video, it's an approximation, so take it with a grain of salt. But this is just, I mean, you can tell why the Russians are surrendering. They are being surrounded left and right and really don't, probably in panic as well, because remember, Ukraine started it all by sending in drones with electronic jammers on them, disrupting Russian communications. I mean, as you can imagine, if you push in this deep and this deep with all those drones, with drone operators, and they're flying drones all over the place, jamming Russian radio communications and what have you, taking out internet communications with Jaegers, blowing up internet stations and what have you. I mean, the Russians had no idea what was going on, more than likely. They knew they were being attacked, they knew they had enemies behind them, and all of a sudden, this happens. I mean, as you can imagine, conscripts, 19, 20-year-olds, they will surrender at that point. And last slide, taking a look at this video. Remember, click that link. You will not regret it. As you can see, afternoon on the 8th, all of this has been secured. They have pushed in, linked up, and now they're also pushing out this way, making use of the Thunder Run, advancing along it, creating more pockets. They are pushing into Sudzha, taking the city. And yeah, so Thunder Blitz, you push in deep along the highways, along the roads to get troops in behind the enemy, cause confusion, deploy sabotage units, Jaegers and what have you. And then you make this big mechanized assault that pushes in on the flanks to surround the enemy, create these pockets, forcing large amounts of enemies to surrender en masse. So Thunder Run and Blitzkrieg tactics on full display here as Ukraine pushed into Russia, and they did a wonderful job of utilizing modern mechanized tactics and strategies, basically. But enough of that. Let's take a look what's happening here and now, not what took place 2 weeks ago. This is the western flank, and god damn it, Ukraine is advancing. So ISW has now confirmed as well. We've seen hints of this taking place on other maps such as the Ukraine control map and Andrew Perpetua's map, that Ukraine was attempting a push along this way here, along the border. And here we have ISW confirming that this is the case. And Ukraine has probably made some moves across the border here to outflank Russians, and they have now gained control down here, pushing the front line westward into the Glushkovo Rayon, as it's called in Russia. I do believe Rayon is something close to a county, maybe. Within you have the Kursk Oblast, and the Oblast is then divided into rayons or however it's pronounced. So Ukraine is pushing westward into Glushkovo County, and as you can see, they have already pushed out here to the same river, and they have begun pushing in from the west here. And this is quite interesting. If you compare the Glushkovo Rayon to what Ukraine has already gained, I mean, they will expand by 30–40% what they are now controlling within Russia. And just to compare with the Ukraine control map and Andrew Perpetua's map, as you can see, they have highlighted that Ukraine was trying to push in to the south here, it being in the gray zone contested area. Interestingly enough, taking a look here on Andrew Perpetua's map, Ukraine has used airstrikes to support the Ukrainian push along the border. That means Ukraine can operate with aircraft relatively close to the Russian border, well within range of Russian surface-to-air missiles. Very interesting that Ukraine are bold enough and are able to launch airstrikes within Russia in this way. I find that very interesting that Russia is unable to shoot these aircraft down. Also up here you have a lot of Russian missile strikes, airstrikes on the Ukrainians, trying to prevent this push north, as indicated here on the Ukraine control map. Remember, if you take a look at the ISW map, this is where Ukraine, according to ISW, has pushed north and trying a big pincer move to encircle Russian forces. So I'm thinking that is why Russia has allocated all these indirect fire missions against the Ukrainians. It is to prevent that encirclement, that pincer move, from taking place. And this is well and truly interesting. I was wondering if this was gonna happen the other day when I made a video, but it seems it happened this morning. The last bridge over same river in Karish village was destroyed, according to Russian blogger. And this is the UA live map. And here you have Karish, this is Glushkovo, and you have, oh, I've forgotten this town here. So, but you had a bridge at Glushkovo, this town, and here at Karish. Ukraine blew up Glushkovo bridge, and then they blew up this one. And this morning, they blew up the last bridge that Russia could utilize to bring in reinforcements and supplies to this front line. That now is blown. And I mean, with no bridges, that means any Russian forces in this area here cannot retreat north of the river. They are now trapped because remember, Ukraine has pushed out to the same river here and basically cut the Russians off from Koronevo, right? So this area here is now isolated, with Ukraine controlling the territory all the way up to the river, and they are now blown all the bridges. So all the Russian forces here, they are now trapped. So taking a look at a map I made a couple of days ago in another video. Here at Glushkovo, bridge blown, Zvanoe, bridge blown, and this morning the last bridge was blown up by Ukraine. And Ukraine has also pushed in here. Russia has blown a couple of bridges over the river here as they retreated. But interestingly enough, we have indications that Ukraine is actually operating in Tetkino anyway, and we will return to that later on. But as you can see, this is the river here, and the Russians operating down here, they have no way of moving north at all. They are trapped. So their only option is to fight on for as long as possible and hope that maybe some of them can get airlifted with helicopters out of the area. Maybe Russia can set up bridges using engineering equipment and stuff like that. But if that doesn't happen, they will eventually run out of ammunition. And when that happens, they will have to surrender. And Ukraine can just step in, walk in, and gain control of the entire Glushkovo county. So what is it that Ukraine is facing over here? Well, this unit here is the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade. They are positioned here around Snagost, south of Koronevo, holding the front line here more than likely, supported by this formation, the 98th Airborne Division, and as you can see, there's quite a few troops connected with this icon. You have the 331st Airborne Strike Regiment, 217th Airborne Regiment, and so on, even an artillery regiment. So there are quite a lot of forces here holding the border and providing support to Koronevo and Snagost and this front line. So you have naval, marine infantry, I guess, and airborne infantry fighting over here. So should be better quality of soldiers, in theory. Not sure if that is the case, but these are the units that more than likely are at the moment in charge of holding this front line. And remember, with the bridges blown, the 98th Airborne Division has more than likely been cut off from this front line, apart from whatever forces they at present have south of the river. Also want to highlight the 47th Tank Division over here at Oboyan. Has been located here for a couple of days on the map. More than likely acting in support of the eastern flank, sending units forward. Quite a lot of tanks in this unit. It is a tank-focused formation, as you can imagine. And since they have not been geolocated at a specific location on the front, like the airborne division over here, I'm thinking they are sending in units as needed along the entire eastern eastern flank to provide armored support to these motor rifle brigades trying to contain the Ukrainian incursion. And there we go. Taking a look at the deep state map, we can see that they are also confirming somewhat that Ukraine is pushing into the south here. And more crucially, they have also confirmed that the push to the river is, well, it's contested, but Ukraine is at the river. So we have something like 4 or 5 mapping sources that all say the same thing, that Ukraine is operating in this area. Some sources say they've reached all this far and are in control. Others claim that they are operating, but Russia is trying. Unsurprisingly, Russia is trying to push Ukraine away from the river, because if Ukraine can establish control of this piece of land here, I mean, the Russians down here are well and truly cut off from any and all reinforcements. But what Deep State also claims, even more interestingly, if you ask me, is this. Take a look. According to Deep State, Ukraine has pushed in to Titkino. They remember, this is the area where Russia fell back from, and they blew up 3 or 4 bridges over the same river. Ukraine claimed the territory, and now apparently Ukraine potentially has pushed in to Tetkino, having crossed the river despite the bridges being blown. So where can we find Tetkino on the Ukraine control map? It's here you have Glushkovo. Here you have Glushkovo, sorry. Svanoe, the Glushkovo, where you have a bridge. Svanoe, where you have a bridge. Here was the last bridge that was blown today. And all the way over here, you have this border town, right on the border between Ukraine and Russia, Tetkino. And this is where, according to Deep State, Ukraine has now pushed in and are operating within the town itself. So, Deep State map says this: Ukraine is operating in Russian-held territory on the eastern side of the same river. That should be over here. If we zoom in on Tetkino, it should be this area, right? Looks about correct. Here's the bridge. And what is this weird thing here, right and smack in the middle of this town? If we zoom in, it's a factory area of some sort, as you can see. So apparently this factory is where the fighting is going on right now in Tetkino, if we are to believe Deep State. Very interesting. Potentially, could they have crossed the bridge bringing in proper infantry, or is it special forces, rangers, Jaeger style units conducting reconnaissance maybe? Who knows? But Ukraine is here. They are contesting the area according to Deep State, putting pressure on the Russians in Tetkino. So what does it all mean? Well, if this here white purple line is the river, we have now 3 main bridges destroyed. Ukraine has potentially pushed out all the way to river, controlling this piece of vital territory between Koronevo and Snagost. Ukraine is pushing westward along the border, and as you can see, they are in a position to do another flanking move, blitzkrieg maneuvers here, pushing in north and south, encircling Russians. And on top of that, they've pushed in here, potentially pushed into Tetkino, and if they take Tetkino, are we looking at another push from the west into this Glushkovo county? I mean, it goes without saying that this area here is where we'll more than likely see Ukraine make a big push to take control of all of this. And the question is, will the Russians fight to the bitter end, or will we see mass surrenders as the Russians run out of ammunition, food and water and medical supplies? Interesting as hell. Here you have that potential pincer move. This is where Russia has launched massive amounts of indirect fire, trying to prevent this from happening, obviously. Ukraine has pushed into here. Forgotten the name of this town. As you can see, it's not in control. This is contested area. Russians are trying to hold the line. This is very important because if Ukraine can get this far, Russia basically can only rely on this highway here for mass logistics. There are obviously smaller roads between all these towns and villages. But if you want to move troops, logistics, and vehicles, tanks quickly to the front line, it is this highway here. And if Ukraine can cut off these smaller highways down here, it leaves Russia with fewer options from bringing in heavy equipment to the front line. So this interesting, this as well, but this is where Ukraine will more than likely push the advantage in the coming weeks. This, still no idea what's going on here. I saw a comment in one of my videos, I believe it was, that this was a failed Ukrainian attempt at an incursion and that Ukraine has fallen back. No clue what's going on at all, but ISW has not removed this patch. So it looks as if, according to ISW at least, that Ukraine has successfully pushed in and are holding this area. And remember all the airborne division that we had located up here, more than likely allocating troops to contain this, which means fewer troops to hold Koronevo, fewer troops to fight down here, as they are forced to allocate troops up here in case this becomes a bigger push aimed at Rylsk. Also, quick word here on the Russian response. As you can see, you have lots of forces down here as well as down here, and it appears as if Russia has not allocated all that many troops from down here up here. This tank division came from down here, as far as I can tell, so they moved it from the Kupiansk front all the way up here to help with the fighting going on. So the incursion here is obviously an attempt to force Russia to take forces from Kharkiv and elsewhere, Kupiansk for instance, allocating them up here, making it easier to fight here, allowing Ukraine to potentially move units from these front lines down to the Pokrovsk operation. But we haven't really, as far as I can tell, haven't seen Russia moving massive amounts of forces from Kharkiv or elsewhere to help out up here. So the question is, what the hell is Russia doing? Don't they have enough troops? Yes, they have enough troops. They have 100,000 forces down in Kherson in the far south, because Ukraine has been talking about this entire year so far how they have been building up their amphibious forces. They have 200 assault craft. They released videos of Marines doing beach landings and stuff like that. So fearing an attack in Kherson, Russia allocated 100,000 troops to that area. So Russia has the forces to handle with this incursion. The thing is, I think Russian generals are trying to be smart about it. They figured that Ukraine wanted Russia to panic with this incursion. Russian generals realized that Ukraine wants us to send everything we have up here to stop this from happening. At the same time, the Russians are thinking, but we have more manpower than Ukraine. We have more resources. If we play it smart and be cool and just calm down and contain this, we can still push to Pokrovsk and force Ukraine to make a decision. Should Ukraine defend Pokrovsk or continue with this incursion, right? So it's a chicken race, right? Where you have Russia pushing for Pokrovsk and you have Ukraine pushing in here towards Rylsk or Kursk or wherever they're going. And both sides are waiting to see who will falter first? Who will give in first? Will Russia give in and start allocating manpower like crazy to hold this incursion? Or will Russia keep pushing to Pokrovsk and Ukraine will have to eventually go, damn it, we need to abandon this campaign and send everything down to the already established front lines? I think that's what's going on. I think the Russians are avoiding panic. I think they're trying to be smart and trying to not fall for the trap, trying not to act as Ukraine expects them to do. The question is if Russia will allocate forces from Kherson, perhaps. Like I said, they have 100,000 troops down there. They can easily take 30,000 and get them up here to help with the defense, right? So we'll see what happens. But I'm thinking this potentially, by the looks of it, weak response from Russia could be an attempt to try and play it smart, not overreact, and force Ukraine in the long run to make a decision. Keep this up or potentially lose down at Pokrovsk. And that's the end of the video. I mean, a lot of interesting things going on. Bridges being blown, Ukraine crossing into a border town, opening up potentially a new front in the west, and Russia standing the risk of losing an entire county, or whatever you want to call it, in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, Russia is still pushing along the other front lines, potentially trying to play a game of chicken here with Ukraine to see if Ukraine will break before Russia. So high stakes games going on at the moment. We'll see who blinks first, in other words. Well, with all that said, go på marsch, Ukraine, and give them hell.